Before this video starts, I want to give a quick shout out to Coolwaffle, amazing YouTuber. He's got amazing gameplay videos. He's a good friend of mine. Go check out his channel. Link in the description below. And I hope you enjoy this video. Hello everyone and welcome to another Golden Hawk video. My name is Golden Hawk and today we're going to be doing the last part of the true story of Jim the Wonder Dog read aloud, and the last part of the series I've been doing. Now it's been really fun because this book has been really good. So I hope you enjoy this video. Remember to like, subscribe, and hit that notifications bell for more videos, and I hope you enjoy. Chapter 7, Jim the Predictor. In 1932, Mr. Sam took over the Rough Hotel and remodeled the already elegant building. The hotel stood near the town square, not far from the stately brick Saline County Courthouse. The hotel's entrance was richly tiled. The inside balcony was grand, with gold and red columns. The dining room featured orchard walls and a lavender rug so soft it felt like velvet. It was the first public dining room in Marshall to be carpeted. A resident remembered watching Mr. Van Arsdale and his beautiful Llewellyn setter take their evening walk. He was a handsome man, and it was a wonderful picture to see the two going around the square. By then, Jim had been famous for some time. Stories about him had appeared in magazines and newspapers across the country. Mr. Sam put Jim's picture on the highway billboards for the hotel. No longer did just the traveling salesman who saw Mr. Sam's billboard come to the hotel. Now hundreds of people from nearby and faraway places were eager to see and meet Jim. More astounding than all of Jim's accomplishments performed in the hotel lobby, however, was that Jim now seemed to also be able to predict the future. One of his most amazing predictions involved a cat named Flossie that belonged to one of Mr. Van Arsdale's friends. Jim touched pieces of paper with his paw to tell how many kittens Flossie would have. He picked 5. Flossie ended up having 5 kittens. He also correctly predicted how many would be male and how many would be female, using the same method. Jim made the same predictions for people, too, letting various couples know if their baby would be a boy or a girl. Once he trusted 2 pieces of paper. The lady had twins. Jim picked Franklin Delano Roosevelt to win over Governor Alf Ladone of Kansas in the 1936 presidential election, and predicted the New York Yankees in 1936 World Series victory over the New York Giants. Mr. Sam's nephew remembered. Jim picked the Kentucky Derby winner, I think 7 times in a row. The names of the horses were put in envelopes and sealed. He would pick one, they'd put that one in the safe, and they'd see if that horse would turn out to be the winner. And it was. Mr. Sam never used Jim's predictors on such events for his own gain. Mr. Sam said he did not understand Jim's powers and refused to take advantage of them. This is not to say that Mr. Sam did not use Jim to help his business. The dog's performances drew attention and people to the hotel. Sometimes Jim also served as a very charming bellman, showing guests to their rooms. Despite his own restraint, Mr. Sam constantly received telegrams from gamblers asking Jim to help them. Neither dog nor master ever did, except for that one time in Florida. Many times, Mr. Sam, Pearl, and Jim traveled south in the winter. During one Florida excursion, they attended a horse race as a little side entertainment for Pearl. Mr. Sam had Jim pick the winner. He did. Mr. Sam did not try that again. When he was away from the hotel sightseeing or fishing, Mr. Sam would hire a hotel bellhop to take Jim for walks. By then, Jim's fame had spread all the way to Florida, and so the bellhop knew about the seller's talents. The young man took advantage of the situation by having Jim pick the winners of various horse races for several days in a row. Then he placed bets using Jim's predictions, and yes, he won. News of the bellhop scam came to the Van Arsdales via a mysterious note in the hotel mail, apparently from the bookies who were taking the bellhop's bets. Decorated with a scary skull and crossbones, it ordered them to get out of town if they valued their dog's life. A worried Mr. Sam and Pearl took the threat seriously. They packed their belongings and, with their beloved dog, hightailed it up the coast. Jim the dog. What was Jim like in real life? When he wasn't performing, was he just a normal dog? Well, in some ways he was, and in some ways He wasn't. The most unusual thing about Jim's appearance, everyone seemed to agree, was his eyes. They were large, human-like, and intelligent. One man recalled, "As far as I was concerned, it was impossible to look him in the eyes." Another witness to Jim's many deeds described a special depth to his eyes. And a cousin of Pearl's once observed, "The eyes of that dog could just look right through you. It's unbelievable the things that he knew and what that dog could do without prompting. He didn't do dog tricks. He did do things that Sam asked him to do so quick, if you weren't watching, you missed them. And the dog did not like to do them a second time. Sometimes Jim did not particularly want to do them a first time. Although he always obeyed Mr. Sam's commands, Jim was not one to seek out the spotlight. Maybe he had been called on too many times. The requests were relentless. Mr. Sam's niece remembered, you could depend on it. If a car pulled up outside the hotel and Jim went and hid in the baggage room, someone would walk through the door asking, "Where's Jim the Wonder Dog? I want to see him perform." Maybe Jim just wanted to get his beauty sleep instead. Like most dogs, he needed about 12 to 14 hours of sleep a day. That could explain why one local farmer insisted, "I have seen the dog time and time again, just a lazy-looking setter dog just laying there." And when he was not sleeping, like so many of his canine peers, Jim was always up for eating. At meals, Jim was fed table scraps. His favorite food was cornbread. The dog also gobbled sweet treats when given the chance. A man who grew up in Marshall shared a childhood memory. On Saturday afternoon, we'd come out of the movie theater and go buy sugar cookies on the way home. We'd go in the hotel, and if Mr. Sam wasn't there, we'd go around where Jim laid behind the stairway and feed him cookies. Apparently, Mr. Sam did not approve, but it is said that Jim most certainly did. Even though Jim steadfastly refused to do dog tricks, such basics as rolling over or playing dead, Mr. Sam said in a newspaper interview that Jim does have a trick of jumping around like a frog when I tell him to, but he thought of that himself. When we were up north, I took him to a pool where hundreds of little frogs were jumping on the bank. Jim watched them all afternoon. When he returned to the hotel, he showed us how the frogs jumped. In general, Jim was quite clear that his likes and dislikes. He liked to roll in the smelly dead fish. He did not like to play with other dogs. In fact, he ignored them. Fetching the ball or playing with dog toys also failed to engage him. Yet, what he lacked in basic canine interest, he made up for with excellent manners. He never walked in front of people or brushed against them. Instead, he always walked around them, and the setter was never yappy. He also prized family peace. Mr. Sam was known to take a nap in upstairs bedroom at the hotel, and he always threw the pillows on the floor before doing so. This aggravated his wife enough that Pearl was known to yell at Mr. Sam about it. Jim must have overheard their pillow spats one too many times, because one afternoon, Mr. Sam came down after a nap, only to have Pearl go upstairs and find Jim putting the pillows back on the bed. Truth be told, Mr. Sam and Pearl never knew what Jim might do next. One hot summer day at the hotel, Pearl came upon a panting Jim. She asked the setter if he wanted to go upstairs and take a nice, cool bath. Then she went about her business and forgot all about her conversation with Jim. Much later, she happened to be by the bathroom and discovered Jim sitting in the bathtub patiently waiting for his cool bath. Pearl couldn't resist asking him, "Well, if you're that smart, why didn't you just turn on the water and go ahead?" Although you would have thought a smart stud like Jim would be in high demand for breeding, Jim actually sired only one litter of puppies in his lifetime. Still, he was as proud of them as any father could be. One afternoon at the hotel, while entertaining friends, Pearl went looking for some photographs of Jim's pups that someone had sent her, but she couldn't remember where she had put them. Jim walked across the room to the desk and placed his foot on the drawer with the pictures. Turns out that when the pups grew up, not one had any of Jim's talents, but Jim never seemed bothered by that. Chapter 9. Jim and Family. It is said that sometimes Jim's smarts made him act in unexpected ways. While checking out a hotel on one of their many trips, Pearl was busy packing, and Mr. Sam mentioned that he wanted to swing by a barber shop for a haircut before they left town. Next thing she knew, Pearl heard the car horn honking. If he is in such a hurry, he could just come and help her pack, Pearl thought. Only come to find out, it wasn't Mr. Sam making the racket. When she went downstairs, Pearl found Jim sitting in the front seat honking the horn. Mr. Sam enjoyed traveling across the country and going on hunting trips with his much-loved setter. Jim was invited to many places to perform, including the 1933 Chicago World's Fair. According to one newspaper report of that engagement, Jim was to appear in the Science Building giving performances of his dog education. Mr. Sam had to cancel the trip, however, because of problems Jim was having with a stiff leg and shoulder. In August of 1935, Jim worked his usual magic in Khmer, Wyoming, including identifying the county attorney when asked. The editor of the local newspaper wrote a story about his performance that begins, Jim the Wonder Dog, who sees all and now knows all, was in Khmer Wednesday evening. At least two Missouri newspapers had declared the setter Jim the Wonder Dog in 1932. It was the name that stuck. Although his dog was now more famous than ever, Mr. Sam still wanted to keep his best friend close. When Hollywood offered Mr. Sam a vast sum of money if Jim would work in the movies for 1 year, Mr. Sam turned the offer down. Mr. Sam said Jim's gift was God-given and he would not profit from it. He never did. Jim was family after all, and he was needed at home. Because of her health, Pearl was unable to have children. Mr. Sam's grandniece recalled a painting by Pearl, an amateur artist in her own right, that hung at the Van Arsdale's lake house. It was a portrait of Jim staring into an empty cradle. The family believed that Pearl's biggest dream was to fill that cradle with a baby and to have Jim take care of that baby, she said. As the years passed and the hope of the couple having a child faded like calico in the sun, Jim became the child they never had, completing their little family. And like any proud mother, Pearl cherished pictures of her boy. She went on to paint a grand portrait of her Jim, a beautiful oil, even though Pearl failed to leave enough room for all of Jim's tail. Throughout his life, Jim continued to hunt with his master and astound friends and strangers alike with his talents. He grew into a fine, stately dog. 8 days after his 12th birthday, Jim was doing what he loved most, going on a trip. This time fishing in the lake of the Ozarks with his Mr. Sam. When the two arrived, Jim hopped out of the car. He ran a short distance, then he collapsed on the ground. Jim rushed his beloved Jim to a nearby veterinary hospital. Jim died shortly after, cradled in his master's arms. Mr. Sam brought Jim home one last time to the rough hotel. Pearl would always remember the sight of her strong, confident husband sobbing as he carried their dear friend through the hotel entrance. Pearl and Sam were both devastated by Jim's death, and they refused to have him forgotten or to be alone in death. The Van Arsdales decided they wanted their beloved dog to be buried with the rest of their family at Marshall's Ridge Park Cemetery. However, it was against the cemetery's rules for dogs to be laid to rest there. The compromise they struck was to bury Jim in a special casket just outside the cemetery fence. As time passed, the cemetery grew larger, and the fence was moved to include Jim's burial spot. The famous hunting dog's grave is now visited more often than any others in the cemetery. That would certainly make Mr. Sam happy. Some years after Jim was gone, the people of Marshall also built a beautiful garden to honor Jim, their most famous citizen. It is located on the grounds where Mr. Sam's rough hotel used to stand. A beautiful bronze statue of Jim, created by Missouri sculptor Andy Davis, is the centerpiece of the park. What would Jim think about so many people still being fascinated by him? Maybe if he was still here, he would place a paw on words from a song people sang during his time. Life is just a bowl of cherries. Don't take it serious, it's too mysterious. Jim was smart enough to know that there are things you just can't explain. As one guest at the Rough Hotel said after seeing Jim perform, we went out in a wonder. What in the world could produce a dog like Jim? Nobody could figure it out. They didn't know it in the 1930s, and the question has never been answered since. And that is the end of Jim the Wonder Dog by Marty Rhodes Figley. As always, I want to thank Roadrunner Press for letting me share this amazing book out loud, and I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. The reason I wanted to do 3 chapters instead of 2 normally is because I just couldn't stop at 2. It was such a good book. Thank you again, Roadrunner Press, for letting me share this book with my YouTube viewers, and I hope you guys enjoyed this as much as I really love sharing it to you. Remember to like, subscribe, and hit that notifications bell for more videos, and I will see you next time. Ooh, and P.S. Sorry for such a long video. Adding another chapter kind of added some more time to it, but if you made it this far, thank you. And again, I really hope you enjoyed this as much as I liked reading it.